Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Travel Coffee Break. I'm Alistair Mackenzie, and I'll get rid of that screen there. And I've got several guests with me, not all assembled yet, because we're going to talk about a new book that's come out that looks at a discernible trend towards engaged travel. I've got both Matt, forgetting your second name, Matt
Barker.
With me, who was the inspiration, or at least was the sort of driving force behind putting this book together, and Mark Horoshovsky, who is Mark. You were one of the contributors, weren't you?
Correct. Yep.
And have a section in the book. We're expecting Ethan Gelber to be joining us later. He's the editor of the book, and another. Oh yes, Carlos Topete, who has been on the Travel Coffee Break before. And he's going to be talking about what he does and the importance of microfinancing, which is a subject, again, he's spoken about before. Before we get there, though, let's just turn to Mike Young, who, for those of you who know these regular hangouts, Mike's my sort of co-presenter, except he hasn't been for the last couple of weeks. Welcome back to you, Mike.
Thanks. Thank you.
And that's because you've been over in home territory, over in Louisiana.
That's correct. South Louisiana and New Orleans, of course.
And it wasn't just going back and seeing the family, it was also updating your Mike's Travel Guide on Louisiana.
That's correct. I spent three days in New Orleans in total, and then also did spent some time around the Gonzales area, or the river parish areas of South Louisiana. So Gonzales is the jambalaya capital of the world. When you hear jambalaya, you can really only get jambalaya in one real place, and that's in Gonzales, Louisiana. And you know, it's one of these dishes. It usually takes around 4 hours to make, and they normally make this outside. So you know, normally you get it at a high school graduation or a wedding or a funeral. And of course, there's the annual jambalaya festival that you can get jambalaya at as well.
What are the ingredients?
I'm sorry?
What are the ingredients?
Well, the main ingredients, of course, is rice, and of course, there's two types of jambalaya. There's chicken and sausage and pork and sausage. If anyone says that there's seafood jambalaya, that's fake. That's not real. And jambalaya does not have any tomato products at all in it. So if you see jambalaya that looks red or orange, you should know right away that's fake. Stay away from that. Okay. So there is one place that has jambalaya that you can buy year-round. It's actually a little place called the Jambalaya Shop, and they make authentic jambalaya. They have one location in Gonzales, and they have several locations in the Baton Rouge area, which is right outside of Gonzales. So, you know, Baton Rouge, obviously the larger city than Gonzales. But if you go to Gonzales or you're anywhere in South Louisiana, you owe it to yourself to have real jambalaya and to go to that area and pick some up. In addition to that, there's also several plantation homes to visit, one being Oak Alley, which is a great place to visit, and also the Homeless House. And of course, there's several other as well in that area. So that was one thing I worked on, and of course, the rest of my time was in the great city of New Orleans, which is a spectacular place to visit.
For those who know Mike, Mike actually lives in Holland, which is why he's gone over to Louisiana, and he has a site, Mike's Travel Guide, which is literally, as it suggests, it covers European mostly destinations, lots of videos, lots of practical kind of stuff, and in fact we've talked about your guide, because every now and then for the Travel Coffee Break, Mike will put together one of his little presentations, little sort of slideshow, as it were, and take us through. And we've talked about New Orleans. So you've been basically updating some of those amazing restaurants and places that we went to. I've put up, if you care to look at the Showcase app, which you can find on your, if you're watching this in the Google Plus event page, then top right-hand corner you should see a Q&A button, and if you click on that, it actually toggles between the Showcase and the question and answer app on the right-hand side of the screen. And so if you look at that now, the Showcase, I've put Mike's site there, so you can find it easily. And no doubt, Mike, you're going to be updating that, I'm guessing.
Yeah, the New Orleans section hasn't been updated for 3 years, and that's what we're going through. We're going to do a major update on our New Orleans content. and South Louisiana content. And it will reflect more of what we're doing currently with our Amsterdam and Paris and Barcelona content. So it'll reflect more of that. And right now it doesn't. So it's going to take us a while to do that. We'll do it probably over the next 6 weeks or so. But that's one of our goals.
Excellent, and more food emporiums. What Mike's good at is finding these amazing little shops that sell the most extraordinary kind of stuff, and I'm hoping you've got some more of those for us.
Yeah, we definitely have more food content. So one of the things we cover is the oldest, or we will be covering the oldest and second oldest restaurants in New Orleans. So that's definitely, both of those are excellent places to go. And there's the Antoine's is the oldest, Two Jacks is the second oldest, and there's obviously the Arnaud's and Brennan's and these older established places to go. They're really excellent places to go when you go to New Orleans. And there's a lot of bad places to eat in New Orleans, but the ones I'll highlight will obviously be the ones that you should invest in going into or try to go to. There's some really good food to be had there in that area.
Here's a topic for future discussion on the ethics of blogging and the like. I mean, should Mike be naming the bad ones?
No, I stay away from that. I'll just highlight the good ones. And, there's just, like I said, just too many bad ones to mention. But the ones I mentioned on here are definitely worth going to.
Okay. Well, we're going to turn now to responsible travel, not least because I see that Ethan Gelber has joined us, at least his avatar has for the moment. But before we do, I've got a question in the Q&A app. And again, for those who are watching, if you want to ask a question, you can do it by pressing the Q&A button on the top right-hand corner of your screen. This one's from Ron Marder. He's actually left several little questions here. And it's, Mike, what are the examples of practical / responsible travel in Louisiana? Any tips on what to do or not to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. New Orleans especially, and even South Louisiana, is a place of indulgence. And, New Orleans has also been claimed as being a decadent city. And, it's a great place to visit, but when people go there, they do decadent things, and they do things that are extraordinary, and that includes food, music, and partying. And when I mean partying, I mean alcohol. But we got to remember also New Orleans has had Katrina. Rita was just a little bit west of New Orleans, about 2 hours west. That was another hurricane that happened that same season, and of course the oil spill. So one of the things that's even being responsible is just visiting New Orleans and spending your money. Tourist is a big industry in South Louisiana, especially in New Orleans, and by doing that, you're helping to promote those businesses. I know, my friends online right now, or my friends here hosting would say, "Oh, well, that's not really, responsible tourism." But when you think about the city being underwater, 80% being underwater just 9 years ago, having people go there and spend money is responsible because it is allowing these people to have jobs there. So my thing is go to New Orleans and spend money.
And stay not in the Hilton or the Marriott, but stay in one of the local chains.
Yeah, and there's a plethora of local small hotels to stay in, and also small restaurants that are locally owned that are not chains. And New Orleans itself, the actual proper portion of New Orleans, the proper city, is filled with these families that run these small businesses much more than the rest of the United States.
Excellent. Well, Mike, it's great to have you back. So no doubt we'll hear in one of the next a few weeks a more detailed report from there and other places. Let's turn to the book. Welcome to you, Ethan. Why don't you kick us off, Ethan, with a description of exactly what this project is about, while I faff around on the showcase thing and put up a link to it.
You always terrify me when you want a description of exactly anything, because I'm not very good at that.
Yeah, I play to your weaknesses, mate. What I'm getting at is...
In January, we launched something called Adventures Less Ordinary, How to Travel and Do Good. It is an ensemble of contributions from 24 I'd like to call them leading experts, voices, practitioners in the volunteer and philanthropic travel space, laying at everyone's feet a vision of where volunteerism and philanthropic travel is today, as kind of a snapshot, an industry snapshot, valuable to consumers, that's an off point for further discussions and analyses about where we can bring the space in the weeks, months, years, future, so that it can be improved. There has been I don't know for how long, the heavy pall of criticism on the voluntourism space. The perception, certainly a media-driven perception, but also valid perception, that many programs in the voluntourism space are not targeting the right kinds of volunteers, applying them to the right kinds of programs, or putting them in the right kinds of communities, not using their skills in the right kinds of ways. And there has been a call in many places to eliminate this kind of stuff. Get rid of it altogether. It's horrible. It's doing the wrong kind of thing. Which is, of course, absurd, because there are wonderful and valuable programs out there. And this has been an effort that there has been an effort that many people have been part of, that we use the hashtag Mend Not End now to describe the effort to find a way to push, whichever direction you want to drag it, the volunteer tourism and philanthropic tourism travel space, to make it better for everyone, for the hosts as well as the volunteers and visitors, for the beneficiaries of people's generosity as well as the people, not necessarily always by volunteering, but using their money, their skills, their knowledge, and sometimes their sweat to be part of an effort.
And this is an attempt to create, in effect, a center of authority on this. I mean, you say that there's been a lot of criticism that efforts are being dissipated in the wrong directions, and this is really a gathering of experts in the field and putting together their thoughts on the opportunities that are available.
Yes, we had people who have expertise in a variety of different areas. Experts on orphanage tourism, volunteer tourism, and people who work with young people, or people who are trying to drive an effort to improve the way people work with young people, which is to say, by not allowing volunteers to interact with them at all. Others who have a strong hand in understanding how conservation and wildlife practices can or cannot benefit from volunteer efforts. Others who are involved in applying professional skills to the improvement of local projects and local knowledge. Mark, who's here with us today, is one of the leading voices in that space. Others who look at community service. Others who look at the philanthropic efforts that are not necessarily volunteer-driven. So people with different areas of expertise, or at least strengths in terms of opinion, who could bring that weight of knowledge to bear in a central book that looks at how everything is today and how to pull it forward in a beneficial way.
And this is, in a way, overdue, because we've been aware for some time now of this very obvious movement, particularly amongst millennial travelers, towards wanting to engage with their destinations, to somehow to make some kind of an impact, as well as just simply soaking up what either the location or the community has to offer. That's the kind of driving force behind it, isn't it? Matt, why don't you've got a view on this one? Why don't you have a go at that?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of the demand and interest in this stems as much from the whole sort of movement for experiential travel as well. That's a great part of it. And exactly as you say, Alistair, it's a sense that people of a certain generation, the millennial age travelers, are increasingly ethically minded, and they're looking for different types of experiences when they go abroad. There's always been a demand for volunteering and voluntourism. I mean, that's been around for quite a long time, but I think what we're seeing now is, or what we seem to be seeing is a trend for not necessarily sort of fixed traditional volunteering placements as such, but just an opportunity to do more when you're traveling. So it's a part of the adventurous experience is finding a deeper way of engaging with the places that you're visiting and the communities you visit. So it's absolutely it's all part of that trend for experiential travel.
And this was a project that sort of started, as I understand it, on outbounding.org, a conversation there. And Matthew, I think of you really as the publisher when it comes to this exercise, where Ethan's the editor. Is that about right?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Explain then how, because Ethan, you got a fabulous write-up from Jessica Voigt on the book, where she basically says it's the best travel book I've ever read, and or written for that matter, I guess. And she also talks about it being groundbreaking, that in terms of its impact on the travel industry, which is high praise indeed coming from somebody like her. So. This book is obviously overdue, but the way you've actually got it to publication, Matt, is quite an unusual path, because you've teamed up with a specialist operator.
That's right. It was quite fortuitous timing, really. So this all evolved. The collection of people involved with the publication really started out on an outbounding discussion, like you say, that was entirely separate to this. This is something that we decided to set up because a lot of people have been talking and discussing about these issues, like Ethan says, for quite some time. So we decided to pull a lot of those people together and organise the debate that took place and has led to the Mend Not End hashtag, which continues even now. And then in parallel to that, and quite independent, Inspired Escapes, formerly Inspired Challenge, but Inspired Escapes have, I guess, been tackling the same questions, the same issues, but from a different context. They've been trying to figure out how you can tap into that demand and that growing market and cater to those people, and create the kinds of experiences that people seem to be looking for. So I can't actually remember how we first came into contact with Inspired Escapes, but it was a fair time ago, early last year, and it seemed like an obvious choice. These two things were happening in tandem and in parallel with each other, and it made a lot of sense to pull these strands together, which is where the book itself came from. That's the kind of genesis behind the book.
That's how we get the groundbreaking book for free.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, their benefit. It's a piece of content that they can use to promote their brand, and it's been tremendously effective. It's been quite an interesting project in many ways, because a lot of the people involved, with a lot of the contributors, the organizations they represent, in a traditional sense, could be seen as competitors to Inspired. A lot of these people are doing similar things and aiming for similar audiences and markets.
People like Mark.
Well, yeah, precisely. I mean, if you look at the list of contributors, there are people, all sorts of people doing very similar things. But it's been quite interesting to see all of these guys come together in a way and almost kind of pull their resources and pull their knowledge and their audiences to really benefit everyone.
Got a question from Sally Grayson, who says, I'll just move to the top of the screen. Matthew, what surprised you most in the volunteer travel debate on outbounding?
What surprised me most? I mean, I was very new to the whole thing. I wasn't much, and I still don't profess to be much of an expert in the voluntourism, in the details of the voluntourism space. But what I guess just the sheer sort of energy and passion and the volume of people that really cared about this and had very deep feelings on what was going wrong and how it could be fixed, and the sort of injustice behind a lot of the way that the industry is developed and the things that it's doing. It was great to see that.
To what extent does, because you've got the tie-up with Inspired Adventures, Inspired
Escapes.
To what extent do they kind of cross-fertilize? So, in other words, to what extent are the things that you read in the book, see in the book, actually represented, as it were, physically as tours that they offer or promote, or?
It's the book deals with a number of sort of philosophical issues, and then it goes right down to practical, tangible things that travelers need to watch out for, and it basically revolves around some of the core principles that came up in the Men Not In debates, which were things like the community itself needs to take a leading role. There needs to be transparency in the way that money and donations are distributed. Skills need to be matched up to local needs, and local people need to define those needs. It's not a case of marching in and saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Those are the kind of the principles that Inspired Escapes build into all of their programs. One of the most interesting things for me from this whole thing has been a sense, even from people within the volunteering space, to say that actually volunteering isn't always the best thing to do. If you care about service and you want to do some good, or you want to have an impact in whatever way, well, the first thing to do is determine whether or not you should volunteer in the first place. Maybe you can have an impact in other ways. That was a really interesting point, and that's something that Inspired Escapes deal with as well. So they're not bringing volunteers into communities. They provide a platform to fundraise and sort of crowdfund for the community project, and you get a chance to visit the community project and meet the people and see where your donations are going to. But it's not about taking unskilled or people with mismatched skills to local communities and sort of get rolling their sleeves up and getting their hands dirty. They don't really do anything like that. So there were a lot of kind of crossovers between the two. Yeah.
Sally Grayson's thinking the same thing as I am. So is doing something always better than doing nothing?
Well, that was one of the most interesting points of the whole debate, is that quite often you're going to have an impact whatever you do. Wherever you go and whatever you do, you have an impact, and there's going to be a downside to some of that. And people really need to, the first thing they need to do is make sure that whatever happens, they're not doing more harm, and they're doing more good than harm. So yeah, I mean, that's a really important question. That's something that people need to ask, and that I think, although there are many people here better qualified than I am to say, but it seems like a lot of the bigger and larger and more established volunteering operators don't necessarily ask that question, and that's something that people are trying to work towards fixing.
I've sort of got. I'm going to ask you, Mark, to address that. But I was going to say that I've sort of got an example from the other way round, in that my son, who I wish was here because then we could talk to him about it. But last year, he took it upon himself, aged 18, to disappear off to the Rift Valley in Kenya, to a town called Gilgil, and work with orphans out there. And when I suggested to him, well, do you want to do other things maybe? There's some really good, companies, travel companies now doing, inspiring work here and there. And he goes, Dad, I don't want to go on holiday. I want to go and work, which is he kind of shunned it. Mind you, he's what is he? He's a Generation Z as opposed to a millennial, I suppose. So, but either way, Mark, yeah, is this the way that you see it? Because you're dealing with this actually hands-on, aren't you?
Yeah, well, and I think there's a couple questions baked inside of that too, right? And so starting with, right, is something better than nothing? And I think, like, as always, right, the answer is it depends. And I think one of the things I really appreciate about the collection that Ethan pulled together is no matter what organization you work with, no matter where you go, you have to help answer that question, for yourself and for that organization. And I think what the book does a good job of sharing is a little bit of a framework of how to do that. So, there's kind of a famous TED talk in the global development industry that gets referenced a lot by Ernesto Ceroli that says, if you want to help, shut up and listen. And I think that's really, there's a great kind of takeaway is no matter where you go, of course you have your own ideals, right? You want an immersive experience, you want good food, you want to meet people, and that's great. But before you think about lining up any of those things, first turning to the organization, the community, the entrepreneur, the nonprofit, the school, the community group, whoever you're going to support, and really trying to understand from them, what's best for that group and what's best for that organization. And if you take time to understand what they're doing, how they have baked in ideas like ethics and sustainability into their own operations, then you can answer those questions of, is my time valuable here? Is my money valuable here? Should I be bringing resources or other? So, yeah, I guess it depends. But shut up and listen, and then you can...
Shut up and listen, I really like, yeah. Tell me a little bit about Moving Worlds and what you brought to the publication.
Sure. So I guess in travel, right? Like a lot of times people view that as sometimes a once in a lifetime experience. So we help people do that. We help people shut up and listen, and we go to organizations. We find from them the type of skills that they need, and then those get posted on our website as projects from 1 week to 1 year, where a traveling professional can connect directly to the organization, use our planning process and training to engage with the hosting organization in advance, and then plan their own, as we call it, experteering trip or volunteering of expertise.
What sort of numbers? I mean, how many projects have you got, as it were, on the books at the moment?
Yeah. We were just running our impact report for last year. So we started just a couple years ago. We've got a little over 100 last year. We're on pace for hundreds more now that we're supporting some corporations and using this type of service. So we're seeing a nice uptick in the trend, and I think what gets us really excited about it is it's kind of this individual. I'm really giving what I'm best at and my most valuable asset, my time and my brain, into really inspiring organizations. I mean, from one-person nonprofits to 20-person startups that are really just at the start of a scale up, and it's fun to see people when they go and travel, and the differences that they have and what they want to experience and orgs they want to connect with. And really our job is to be a platform approach, so we can connect people to really the place where their skills and time are most needed.
Has what you do changed since you first started? In other words, when you started up, you thought it was going to be one way, and
Sure. Yeah, I think it's funny. We joke that originally we kind of had this idea of like Escape from Cubicle Nation or Stick It to the Man. Like really try and get people out of schools or universities or corporations, and try and show them this whole other world. And I think what we found to be most valuable is it's not so much escapism as it is engagement. And it's no matter where you are, no matter who you are, there is if you engage in travel in the right way, it will have a remarkable impact on your life and the people around you. And I think as we've got to connect with with people like Ethan and I met at a conference a couple years ago to really meet with other people who are saying it doesn't have to be don't do this, go do that, but it's really let's find the best way for all industries to really engage and use the transformative effect of travel to help build a more responsible, citizenship-based global population, and one that's really facilitating change and helping each other be more effective at positive change.
And so your contribution to the book, chapter, I guess, was titled what?
So I had a couple. Shoot, I should pull it up. I actually don't remember the exact chapter name.
It's Shut Up and Listen. It is Shut Up and Listen.
Oh, it is Shut Up and Listen.
That is.
There you go.
Excellent.
Thank you. So, and that's really the idea. Is I actually start with this idea of, selfishly everybody wants this really great experience, and what I try and articulate is that the best way to have a good experience is to so the most selfish way to actually go about travel is to really shut up and listen and just really go to the organization and say, how do you want to receive me? And if you can open yourself to some of the ambiguity that will come with that, that's the best type of international experience that you can get.
Yeah. Be prepared to make the same change that we were talking about just now, that between
Exactly.
your idea of what you thought it was going to be like to what it actually is like. Sally says, Mark, you're spot on. Yes, shut up and listen. Quite right. Okay. Ethan, take us through the book itself in terms of those chapters. We haven't got Carlos with us, so just try and describe, if you can, what each kind of topic area covered. I don't mean list everyone, but give us the flavor of what was in it.
Right, I'll do broad strokes. There were two parts to the book, two fundamental parts of the book. One was called Good Actions, What's Being Done, and the other, part two, was Good Intentions, What to Think About, which goes to what I described earlier about the first part being a snapshot of where we are today, looking at a variety of different things, how to work with, or how people are working with children, how people are working with animals, how community service comes into play, how infrastructure projects are also involved, how skill building is important, which is the part that Mark contributed to, and how philanthropy is also playing a part in the volunteer tourism sector, even if it isn't actually about sweat, the hands-on sweat equity, if you will. We also had at the end 3 short sections that were the local voice in an attempt to try to fold in the local perspective on all of this. The local perspective being the one that is most often absent from these kinds of discussions, which is a big problem. I did reach out to an enormous number of local operators, but the standard problem with local operators is that they're 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 people who are nose to the grindstone, working just to get everything from one day to the next. Don't have time for these kinds of contributions.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that as a criticism.
Writing in what's often not their first language and is not their primary skill, so it must be quite a daunting ask.
Exactly, and in fact, one of the contributions was based on several emails from someone saying, I don't have time to respond to this, here's why. And so I took the 4 emails that described why that person wasn't able to contribute and turned that into a contribution. And that's the kind of input I was hoping to be able to draw out of the local operators. And again, it is too bad that Carlos couldn't be here, because he could have provided that. Maybe he still will be able to make it.
He might yet make it.
He provide that other side perspective. Mark here and my perspective, and Matt's and many of the other contributions were those of the sending organization, if you will. But it is a really different thing to be a receiving organization, or it is the poignancy of the second part of the book, Good Intentions and What to Think About, is driven by that local perspective about people saying, you as a traveler or you as a sending organization think about these things, but we as a local, we have not different priorities, but our means of describing them, or our means of where we place our points of emphasis, can sometimes be different. And that is what we did. The Good Intentions, the second part of the book, asked the different people to describe what you would want to think about before you act, what to think about while you are acting, while you're out and about, or while you're counting bills in your wallet to figure out what you can donate, and then what to do after you get home, an important part of the process that often doesn't get analyzed. Your trip isn't over once you get back to the comfort of your armchair. There is a lot that you still can do, and in fact, many of the fantastic efforts that were that were profiled in the book are examples of people who got home and then did something. Mark is actually an example of that. He traveled, he did an immense amount of research, so that when he traveled on his own dime, he made sure he was doing the right thing, and then he got home and said, I've learned so much, I can't find any of this stuff anywhere, so I'll put it together and make a company out of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm generalizing, Mark, and you'll be able to say if I was also Mark. But it's that those were the kinds of profiles. Another thing about
Mark gets a hat tip anyway.
Yes, he does. About the book, we had two basic approaches to the material across both of those different parts. One was the chapter leads. Lead is a bad example, but that was the snapshot type stuff where someone could speak authoritatively about what's happening in a certain subsector of the volunteer industry, volunteer travel industry. But then we asked for what we called eyewitness accounts. Those were shorter pieces that took a much more personal approach to demonstrating how desire can be turned into action, or action can be improved along the way. And Mark's contribution was more personal in that respect, talking about how he has taken his travel perspective and the learning that he acquired during that travel perspective and turned it into something beneficial for travelers and for locals.
Is he right, Mark?
Yeah, that's pretty close.
Talking about you mentioned Mark writing about the skills and the development of skills, but also applying what skills you have to a project that you might be interested in. I got another note, or several from Sally, who's been prolific here. She says, this is relating back to my son. She said, Alistair, does your son have childcare skills? It's a very good question. He sort of does, unofficially, in the sense that he actually earns his living at the moment looking after kids here, being a childminder for parents who are at work, and is developing those skills. But I think he doesn't have a formal one yet, but will do in good time. But Mark, that is your one of your key points, isn't it? That skills is something you need to assess in yourself before you can apply it elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Let me ask another question here. This one's from Ron, and it's really, I suppose, for you, Matt. It's a technical question, and it says, when registering, when registering for Ethan's ebook, my browser issues it's just jumped out of the way. Where's it gone? There we go. My browser issues a warning that the website uses cookies. What exactly is being tracked?
The easy answer is I'm not entirely sure. It's I imagine it's probably just the standard maybe an analytics tracking cookie that's on most sites. There's nothing unusual. There's nothing out of the ordinary with the book.
Yeah, I think you can relax, Ron. My guess is that exactly as Matt suggests, it's no more or less than creating a session for you. Because being you, Ron, you would probably get halfway through it and then forget what your card number is and have to go away. And when you have to re-log in again, it'll save you all that effort. So think of it as a good thing, Ron, and not something to be suspicious of.
The prompt, and you, Alistair and Matt, you would know better than I would. The prompt is in part because European legislation requires it. As opposed to American legislation. Correct? Oh,
I see. Yes, that's true. Yes, you may not be so used to it from that side of the transatlantic, but under European legislation, you have to tell people that you're using cookies, which frankly every site does these days, and it's probably that, Ron. So. So there you go. Sally says, such a pleasure to be listening rather than contributing. Well done, Sal. Okay. Ethan, good question, actually, from Sally. If people learn one lesson from your publication, what would you hope that is?
That you are not the passive client that you might think you are or once were. The volunteer travel space, the evolution of the volunteer travel space, as I have learned in my crash course over the last several months, grew in many cases in response to demand. There were younger travelers who wanted to get out into the world, gap year people especially, resume fillers, people who wanted to put good experience down either before university or after university. And the volunteer travel space grew as a function of that. But it was, while it responded to a need, a consumer need, it also drove that consumer need, and didn't necessarily adhere to best practices, even as they were known in the responsible travel space. And what's with the circle that we're coming back to is the fact that travelers, while they still want to volunteer and while they are still keen for experiences, they're keen to make sure that they're the right kinds of experiences and that their impact is appropriate. And that means the consumer, the traveler, is going to have to be much more active in choosing to make sure that the sending organization is the right one, that the experience is appropriately designed, that it happens in collaboration with the local community, that the money that that person contributes is going to the right kinds of causes in a transparent way. It's about active involvement in the decisions that you have to make. You cannot be a passive consumer, because then you're going to let the industry drive practices that thus far have not been the best. You have to be more active in pushing those choices. You also have to be more active in calling out the bad and complimenting the good. The mend not end approach is that if you as an individual are going to research how you can best apply your skills in the right kinds of places to the benefit of the right kind of community, if you come across organizations that are unwilling to answer the questions you ask, or that are providing imprecise answers or answers that are just patently wrong, then you have to make that known to a broad public, and there are resources available for people who want to do that. You should also be very vocal about finding the right kinds of places and complimenting those places, and reporting back after it's all over. This is that reporting back once you get home approach. You have to be an active, vocal person in providing the right kinds of encouragement, the right kinds of action, and the right kinds of reaction and analysis if you are to make the right kinds of choices and help develop and help mend, not end, the volunteer travel space.
Not so much a question as a statement from Ron Marder. He says, I think we should explore more of the topic of independent volunteering. There are some great, I haven't selected it so it hasn't gone up the top of the screen. Let's get rid of that one. There are some great organizations, but some people, including myself, would prefer to volunteer on the go. Lacking, however, are the tips on what to do and what not to do. Will he find those tips in the book, or is there a volume 2 to come?
I'd like to think there is a volume 2. I can't make any guarantees as yet. There are resources in the back of the book. There are a rather compendious list of resources and links, some of which do point to communities and community groups and community networks that through which you can gain access to experiences if you're on the road and on the go and on your own. But I want to emphasize two things. First, the book speaks not about how best to volunteer through volunteering organizations. It speaks about how best to deliver on a desire to do good, and that's what Jessie Voits was talking about, why she was so impressed by the book. It speaks about how to be a better person and how to be a better traveler and deliver on your desire. So it's not so specific to organizations. It's general to how to find a way to navigate the labyrinthine confusions that misdirect people when they're trying to do things. If you want to be careful, if you want to be responsible, if you want to be a paces, because we're concerned about impact, because we're concerned about the proper application of skills and finding the right kinds of projects and the right kind of communities that have thought through it, often the best way to do it is through organizations. And I don't mean to be dismissive of independent efforts, but if you want to do the right thing in the right kind of way, then there is great benefit to be had from working through individuals and organizations who have sifted through the mess. And I'm picking on Mark here because he's here. His efforts in many cases, while motivated by well, pushed through the umbrella of his organization, or about placing an individual in the right kind of place and in the right kind of time. That isn't organized volunteering as much as it is directed individual volunteering. So be careful about the words you choose and how you want to, and the choices you make. It's about impact. It's not about.
I was thinking that when Jess wrote of it so glowingly and referred to it as a kind of a landmark publication, I was thinking that was in part because it was a kind of a handbook that the industry might use, in a practical way. And what you seem to be saying, Ethan, is that it's actually more about the the spiritual description of what we should be doing rather than a detailed practical handbook.
There's a lot of practical information, an immense amount of practical information. I shy away from spiritual anything because I'm not a particularly spiritual person, and my knee-jerk response to that is how other people respond to. But it does speak to the personal, passion-driven desire to be a good person.
It was a bad choice of words.
No, whatever.
Mark, I could see you were dying to get in there. What were you going to say?
Well, and I'll paste a couple links to the page. We've worked on collecting some very tactical best practices in terms of the questions you should ask if you are doing it independently. What are still the factors that you should consider before going? We see it all the time, right? Somebody's friend or friend of a friend has a foundation, has an organization. And so we've actually open sourced both our training on international skill-based volunteering best practices and a lot of resources. And so, I agree. I think reading the stories that you can get in the book it really helps frame everything. And I think after doing that, once you're going on your own, then hopefully some of the resources that we've open sourced here can be useful as well.
Mike, you've been sitting there. You must have a dozen thoughts that.
Well, one thing I was thinking about all of this is I just wanted to ask each one of the guests that are here today what would be their favorite place in this context to visit.
Ethan, think on your feet.
Oh boy.
Too late, Mark.
I have a bias because my co-founder's in Colombia in Medellin, and the innovation there is happening. And my world right now is how do you innovate on behalf of the customer, the traveler, the social impact. And so seeing some really exciting innovation in Medellin would be close to the top of my list.
Okay, Ethan, do you have a favorite sort of project location?
No, I don't. I mean, I work in communications and content creation and writing, and I would love to see more of the kinds of instruction. I would love to see more skills sharing with the kinds of people from whom I'm trying to get content, so that I can. I'm not expressing this very well. What's the opposite of a vicious circle?
You want to get more emails, but with more detail in that you can then.
No, I want the people who are doing fantastic things on the ground to have the time and ability, or at least some minimal skills, to be able to share word of what they're doing more. So I'm not going to be destination specific. In fact, I'm going to be as agnostic as I can and say I would just love to see people with communication skills out there working with people who have need of communicating.
Okay.
It doesn't always have to be super bridge building practical.
Matt, have you got a particular favorite example?
Yeah, like Mark, I've got a personal bias as well. Peru, actually, funnily enough, not far from Colombia. I spent a lot of time in Peru, and it's pretty much the only place I've ever got my hands dirty in sort of international volunteering myself, and so that's got a fond place in my heart.
Mike, have you actually volunteered anywhere, or?
No. When I was younger, I did, but ever since graduating from the university, I haven't really had too much of a time to do that. So unfortunately, I can say no.
Gotta make the time when you travel.
I want to come back to you, Matt, if I can kind of finish off. This question of, is there a volume 2? I'm very much interested in the mechanics for getting the book there. I mean, what we've got is a piece of commercial content in tandem with Inspired Escapes. The question is this a good business model for this, and is it one that others could perhaps take up and create industry-leading publications themselves?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because yes, that's kind of what we do, there are a few ideas for a sequel to this. Another issue that's been fairly prominent on Outbounding has been the whole problem with animal welfare in tourism, the dolphins and the elephants, and what you should buy from markets, and all of those kinds of questions. And there are a few vague ideas floating around to pull together a new volume on precisely that. So the kinds of things that people should be aware of when they're traveling, specifically to do with animal welfare, the activities that you get involved with, and all of those kinds of things. So we're kind of planning on pulling something along those lines together, and again, that will be in tandem with a travel brand. So it's the idea is that the content itself is 100% neutral and unbiased. That it wouldn't work if it was promotional, but that's the innovative way that you can use content these days. Is actually the virtue of it being unbiased and objective makes it so much more valuable for the person that's or for the brand that's facilitating its creation.
And are you confident that you've achieved that? I mean, I'm asking in the context of a news hiatus at the moment over here in the UK, re the HSBC, Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation's daily newsletter. I'm sorry, I mean the Daily Telegraph. That line between commercial and editorial sanctity is a very difficult one to tread. Are you really confident that you've been able to do that?
Yeah, I mean, without any shadow of a doubt, particularly with a piece of content like this, because we're bringing contributions from people that would not write anything other than that. I mean, the integrity of and the credibility of the people involved with this project speak for itself.
Well, yeah, but then you've also got Ethan Gelber. But then he's cheap. That's all right.
but exactly. I mean, I can't imagine a better stable of contributors and editors to put something together along these lines. But like I say, even from a practical standpoint, this is aimed at millennial travelers, and these are the people that are most digitally active, but also the most immune to branded and promotional messages online. You can't con people, you can't bait and switch. You have to give. It only works if it is definitively and demonstrably excellent and unbiased and objective.
Excellent. So a series then.
Hopefully.
Okay. On that note, I think we'll call it a day. Sally says, that was great. Thank you so much for everybody. That was really good. And from me too. Mike, you were kind of left out in the cold this week, but we knew that was going to be the way anyway. But are you going to be back with me next week?
Yes, I should be back.
Okay, it'll be next week. Will be about ferries. I got very confused in my scheduling because the ferries thing. It's actually National Ferry Fortnight in the UK, and it starts next week, not this week. And I had it in my mind it was this week, so we got very. It's my fault. Forget it. So that's what we'll be talking about next week. But to my guest this week, thank you ever so much for joining me. I think it's been fascinating, and I think the book. Is clearly a great success, and I look forward to the next one. So, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Great, thank you all.
Bye bye.